Hello everyone and welcome back to my playlist of NeuroAnatomy जो हम Snell से कर रहे हैं. Today our target is chapter number 9 which talks about reticular formation and limbic system. रेटिकुलर फॉर्मेशन वर्ड हमने अपनी डिफरेंट वीडियोस में कई दफ़ा डिस्कस किया है कि देयर आर सो मेनी फाइबर्स असेंडिंग डिसेंडिंग ट्रैक्ट्स, और मैं बार बार ये वर्ड यूज़ कर रहा होता था उन वीडियोस में कि दीज फाइबर्स विल अल्टीमेटली गो टू द पार्ट ऑफ द सेरिब्रल हेमिस्फीयर वाया द रेटिकुलर फॉर्मेशन. सो आज हम देखेंगे कि व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द रेटिकुलर फॉर्मेशन. एंड द अदर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट सिस्टम विद इन द ब्रेन सब्सटेंस इज अ पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ डिफरेंट पाथवेज एंड स्ट्रक्चर्स collectively known as the limbic system. तो आइए स्टार्ट करते हैं. What is reticular formation? See, the reticular formation, as its name suggests, resembles a net, and therefore it is called a reticulum or reticular. And this net या network is made up of obviously brain की हम बात कर रहे हैं और nervous system की बात कर रहे हैं. So that network is going to be made up of nerve cells and nerve fibers. This internet, well, internet is a good word for them because it actually is an internet, because the reticular formation connects different parts of the brain, so it is connecting different networks. So this behaves as an internet. Okay, so अक्सर स्टूडेंट इस वर्ड को जब मैं यूज करता हूँ हैरान होते हैं, but anyways it's not the web internet that you are used to or familiar with. This is the internet within your brain. Okay, so this net extends up through the axis of the central nervous system, and when we say the axis of the central nervous system, we typically means कि उसमें spinal cord, medulla, brain stem, actually pura. So from the central axis of the nervous system, it spans and spread to the cerebrum. So from the spinal cord to the cerebrum, इसका reach है, इसका वो जैसे होता है ना वाईफाई के सिग्नल्स होते हैं इंटरनेट के, तो इसके सिग्नल्स हैं from the spinal cord and the brain stem, which is the axis of the nervous system, to the higher centers which exist in the cerebrum. It is strategically placed among the important nerve tracts and nuclei. Strategically placed मतलब इसकी geographic location बड़ी important है. अभी हम diagram में देखेंगे थोड़ी देर में. So see, this is the canvas on which the reticular formation is spread. So messages coming all the way from the spinal cord and the brain stem kind of span throughout the cerebrum. So इसका काफ़ी network strong है, broad network है, और ये काफ़ी सारे areas of सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम को कनेक्ट करता है. Okay, it receives input. अब ज़ाहिर है it's a network. It's a network of neuronal cells. तो इसमें कुछ input आएगा, which is what we will call the afferent fibers, and then there will be some efferent fibers. तो इस reticular formation की तरफ कुछ fibers आएंगे, कुछ neurons अपना messages लेके आएंगे, और कुछ neurons यहाँ से connect करेंगे, यानी fibers निकल के जाएंगे towards other part of the central nervous system. तो इसका जो input है, it is received from the most of the sensory systems and has यानी जितने ascending tracts हैं, and has efferent fibers that descend and influence nerve cells at all CNS levels. यानी I mean this is an important system guys. So यहाँ पर होता ये है कि within the brain substance, within the central nervous system, कुछ इस तरह fibers जब मैं word use कर रहा हूँ तो I basically here mean neurons. कुछ इस तरह न्यूरॉन का एक नेटवर्क है, और ये जो सेंट्रल नेटवर्क है इसमें मैसेजेस आ रहे हैं वाया द इनपुट और द afferent फाइबर्स, और ये जो पूरा रेटिकुलर फॉर्मेशन है इसमें से न्यूरोनल मैसेजेस डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द ब्रेन तक जाते हैं. सो दीज इज आर what we call the efferent fibers. So there are afferent fibers and there are efferent fibers. और अभी हमको अगले कुछ मिनट्स यही बात समझनी है कि कौन कौन से फाइबर्स इसमें इनपुट देते हैं और कहाँ कहाँ ये कनेक्ट होता है. So actually it gives its influence या efferent fibers at all CNS levels. So इसकी इंपॉर्टेंस ज़रा देखेंगे, ये तमाम CNS levels के साथ इंटरेक्ट कर रहा है, चाहे वो cerebellum हो या वो cerebrum हो and whatsoever. The exceptionally long dendrites of the neurons of the reticular formation permit input from widely placed ascending and descending pathways. So the ascending and the descending pathways talk to the reticular formation. Through its many connections, it can influence. अब ये influence की जब बात आएगी तो we are talking about the efferent fibers, and it can influence the activity of. Now look at the range of activities which can be influenced by the reticular formation. It can influence skeletal muscle activity, somatic and visceral sensations, the autonomic and the endocrine systems, and even the levels of consciousness. So it's a very important system. Okay, what is the general arrangement of reticular formation? The reticular formation consists of a deeply placed continuous network of nerve cells and fibers that extend from the spinal cord through the medulla, through the pons, through the midbrain, the subthalamus, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus. The diffuse network may be divided into three longitudinal columns. The first, occupying the median plane, is known as the median column. Then the other one is known as the medial column, and the most lateral one is known as the lateral column. यानी कि जो nerve fibers हैं, which are ये reticular formation के nerve fibers हैं, which are going through the medulla, through the pons, midbrain, पूरे brain stem से होते हुए ये ऊपर जाएंगे, and they will then spread out to the whole of the cerebral hemisphere. तो ये जो fibers which are present and which are going through the brain stem, they are actually divided into nerve bundles क्योंकि ये neurons है ना सारे. So there is a bundle which is in the median plane called the median column. Then lateral to this is the medial column, and the most lateral one is the lateral column. So all these three are bundle arrangements of the neurons of the reticular formation. With classical neuron staining techniques, the group of neurons are poorly defined. Therefore, tracing an anatomical pathway through the network is difficult. या दूसरे अल्फाज में आप ये कह सकते हैं कि pure and proper understanding of the arrangement of the reticular formation is actually not clear. However, with the new techniques of neurochemistry and cytochemical localization, the reticular formation is shown to contain highly organized group of transmitter-specific cells that can influence functions in the specific CNS areas. कहने का मतलब ये जिस तरह today we know there are specific ascending tracks जो particular part से निकलते हैं, particular part तक जाते हैं. So people are working on identifying what are the exact anatomical connections of the reticular formation. The monoaminergic group of cells, for example, are located in well-defined areas throughout the reticular formation. So there must be a role of monoaminergic groups for coordination and control of the talkway process जो बातचीत होती है between the other tracts and the reticular formation. So these cells may play an important role. Polysynaptic pathways exist, and both crossed and uncrossed ascending and descending pathways are present, involving many neurons that serve both somatic and visceral functions. So there are polysynaptic pathways, they have long dendrites, they synapse all the time with different other neurons. Inferiorly, the reticular formation is continuous with interneurons of the gray matter of the spinal cord, while superiorly impulses are relayed to the cerebral cortex. So inferiorly it goes down to the spinal cord, gray matter, and superiorly it goes up to the level of the cerebral cortex. So इसका काफी wide distribution है. Okay? Now, afferent projections. We have to now talk about कि कहाँ से input आता है इस reticular formation में, and then we will talk about the efferent projections. Now, many different pathways, afferent pathways, project onto the reticular formation from most part of the CNS. And they include, for example, spino-reticular pathway, spinothalamic tracts, and the medial limniscus. They all project from the spinal cord and enter into the reticular formation or synapse with the reticular formation. Ascending afferent tracts, including vestibular, acoustic, visual pathway, project from the cranial nerve nuclei and then enter or give input to the reticular formation. The cerebello-reticular pathway, they all other pathways from cerebellum and subthalamic, hypothalamic, thalamic nuclei, they all give input to the reticular formation. Other important afferent fibers arise from the primary motor cortex of the frontal lobe, even from the higher centers, from the somesthetic cortex of the parietal lobe. So if you ask me that what are the input, I would say almost all levels of central nervous system give input and they are connected to the reticular formation. So it is very well connected with the many ascending and descending tracts. So जो भी ascending tract जा रहा है वो एक फाइबर यहाँ डाल देता है कि भाई तू भी अवेयर रह कि मेरे क्या हालात हैं, और जो descending tracts जा रहे होते हैं वो एक फाइबर यहाँ synapse करवा देता है. So that the reticular formation is kind of a very important integral system जो coordinate करता है बहुत सारे different pathways के साथ. Now the efferent projections, इसमें से fibers निकलते कहाँ जाते हैं? Multiple efferent pathways extend down to the brainstem and the spinal cord through different pathways such as reticulobulbar pathway, reticulospinal tract, and to the neurons of the motor nuclei also in the cranial nerves. So it is controlling a lot of different things. Other descending pathways extend to the sympathetic outflow. So it is also giving input to the sympathetic outflow and the craniosacral parasympathetic outflow. So it is also controlling the autonomic nervous system. Additional pathways extend to the corpus striatum, the cerebellum, the red nucleus, substantia nigra, tectum, nuclei. Oh my god, so that's like cerebral cortex, all of the central nervous system. So it is giving its efferent projections to everything. Okay, hey, I know what you are doing. I'm being given input by a lot of different parts, and this is my job to control you. So it's a pretty important part, reticular formation system. इसके functions क्या हैं? Given the vast number of connections of the reticular formation to all parts of the nervous system, and this is very important for you to remember that it is giving connections to almost every part. It is receiving input from almost every part. It is giving input to almost every part. और जब मैं ये sentence कहता हूँ, then you can imagine the quantum of the work it can do. इसके functions कितने broad होंगे. So some of the functions are mentioned here. Control of the skeletal muscle, for example, the contraction of the skeletal muscle, the relaxation of the skeletal muscles, also the antagonistic movement of the muscles, which means कि जब एक flexor compartment का muscle contract करेगा तो extensor compartment relax करेगा. That sort of thing is considered as an important function of reticular formation. Then the control of facial expression muscles. So when you laugh, for example, or you give like cheeky beaky looks to somebody, that is the pathway involved. Obviously through different pathways. So the pathways which are going towards the muscles of facial expression will have an efferent from the reticular formation. Okay, now the control of the somatic and visual sensations by virtue of their central location in the cerebrospinal axis, the reticular formation can influence all ascending pathways as well as the descending pathways. The influence may be facilitative or inhibitory. In particular, the reticular formation may have a key role in gating mechanism. So there are a lot of theories presented how reticular function actually perform their job, but the important thing that we know is it's a centrally placed nervous bundle pathway, एक network है जिसमें input आ रहा है from almost every part of the CNS and it is giving output यानी efferent to almost every part of CNS. It also controls autonomic nervous system, ये बात हमने कर ली. It includes both sympathetic as well as parasympathetic control. Then it controls the endocrine system, either directly or indirectly through the hypothalamic nuclei. Reticular formation can influence the synthesis or release of release inhibiting factors. Pituitary के level पर, hypothalamus के level पर, it controls the, because it gives input to the pituitary and hypothalamus as well. Now, influenced to the biological clock, something to do with the pineal body and melatonin, so it gives efferent fibers to pineal body as well. Now, reticular activating system, arousal and the level of consciousness, which basically means the same, are controlled by the reticular formation. Multiple ascending pathways carrying sensory information to the higher centers are channeled through the reticular formation, which in turn projects this information to different parts of the cerebral cortex, causing a sleeping person to actually awaken. So it's just making you awake. कभी lectures में सो रहे होते हैं तो this is the one, if activated, will awake you. Different degrees of wakefulness seem to depend on the degree of activity of the reticular formation. So if you are half sleepy, half awake, reticular system is half active, half not active. That sort of a story. Incoming pain sensation strongly increase the activity of the reticular sensation. यानी आप सो रहे हो और आपको कोई चुटकी भर ले और आपको कोई मार दे तो थप्पड़ लगा ले कोई तो आप फौरन से जाग जाएंगे because pain stimulus activates the reticular system and then you are awake. And acetylcholine is supposed to play an important part in the whole process. Thus, the reticular formation almost totally ignored in the past, ये देखें ज़रा इस पे इतनी तवज्जो नहीं दी गई, is now being shown to influence practically all activities of the body. Guys, that's why I say कि ये जो reticular formation है ना, it's like a master stroke. It's a very important network of neurons. इनका role अभी तक भी हमें बिल्कुल clear से पता नहीं है कि ये करते क्या हैं. But you listen to this statement, guys. It influences practically every single activity of the body. Okay, it's an important centrally placed network of neurons. तो ये मुझे डिस्कस करना था आज की वीडियो में. And the next thing that I have to talk about is a very important system which is organized in a special manner called the limbic system. तो आइए start करते हैं limbic system. Literal sense में the word limbic system basically means the border. Limbic का ये meaning है, it means the border or margin. and the term limbic system was loosely used to include a group of structures that lie in the border zone between cerebral cortex and the hypothalamus. So ये इसके literal meanings हैं. So I will take to you to a diagram. ये वाली जो particular diagram है. So this is what we are looking at is एक cerebral hemisphere हटा दिया है, तो ये deep structure हम देख रहे हैं. And you know there in the middle there is a thalamus. So thalamus और ये cerebral cortex है. So thalamus यहाँ पर middle में और सेरेब्रल कॉर्टेक्स, इनके बीच में ये जो बाउंड्री वॉल स्ट्रक्चर है, ऑल दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंग, इसको नाम दिया गया लिम्बिक सिस्टम बिकॉज इट इज एट द बॉर्डर ऑफ टू इंपॉर्टेंट स्ट्रक्चर्स, द सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फीयर एंड द थैलेमस. तो इस तरह इसका नाम पड़ा है लिम्बिक सिस्टम. और लिम्बिक सिस्टम की वक्त के साथ साथ फिर इंपॉर्टेंस पता चलती गई कि वाई दिस सिस्टम इज पर्टिकुलरली इंपॉर्टेंट. पीपल ऑब्वियसली स्टार्ट डूइंग अ लॉट ऑफ रिसर्च कि ब्रेन के किस पार्ट का काम क्या है. सो एज ऑफ टुडे several behaviors of human beings are attributed to the limbic system, and these include emotion, behaviors, ड्राइव, यानी जो भी आपके इमोशनल ड्राइव्स हैं, एंड सो मच सो कि मेमोरी का भी लिंक लिम्बिक सिस्टम के साथ है. और एनाटॉमिकली द लिम्बिक सिस्टम के जो स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं दे इंक्लूड, यू विल सी डिफरेंट पार्ट्स. इसकी पूरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इस तरह से है लिम्बिक सिस्टम की कि देयर आर सर्टेन पार्ट्स. सो फॉर एग्जांपल देयर इज एन एंटीरियर न्यूक्लियस ऑफ थैलेमस, तो एक पार्ट यहाँ पर होगा, एक कोई पर्टिकुलर गायरस होगा, डेंटेट गायरस. सो ऐसे कुछ स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं, ठीक है. और वो स्ट्रक्चर्स फिर आपस में कनेक्टेड हैं बाय सम फाइबर्स. सो there are some structures and then there are some fibers which connect these structures, and together all of them they combine make the limbic system. So इसके structure के दो different parts हैं. They include the subcallosal, the cingulate gyrus, parahippocampal gyrus, hippocampal formation, amygdaloid nucleus, mammillary bodies, anterior thalamic nucleus. Now the point is कि obviously limbic system को समझने के लिए you should know कि where is the cingulate gyrus. ये हमने किसी और वीडियो में जब cortex, cerebral cortex डिस्कस कर रहे थे, तो we have already discussed कि what is the cingulate gyrus. We know what is the parahippocampal gyrus. We know what is the hippocampus. तो ये तमाम आपको नाम याद होने चाहिए. They are all important structures ऑफ द लिम्बिक सिस्टम. और फिर जो इन स्ट्रक्चर्स को कनेक्ट करने वाले पाथवेज हैं उनके नाम क्या हैं? दे आर दी एल्वियस, द फिम्ब्री, द फॉर्निक्स, द मैमिलो-थैलेमिक ट्रैक्ट, द स्ट्राया टर्मिनालिस. So you see there are some of these connecting pathways. So this for example is the fornix. It is connecting some structure including the mammillary body and going back towards the dentate gyrus and then the hippocampal gyrus. तो ये जो connecting pathways हैं, 4-5 connecting structures हैं जिनके नाम याद होने चाहिए. अभी इनके बारे में हम पढ़ेंगे भी कि ये एक्चुअली हैं क्या, बट ओवरऑल स्टोरी आपको बता रहा हूं कि सपोज दिस इज स्ट्रक्चर नंबर 1, दिस इज स्ट्रक्चर नंबर 2, स्ट्रक्चर नंबर 3, स्ट्रक्चर नंबर 4, और ये स्ट्रक्चर्स ये हैं: सिंगुलेट गैरस, डेंटेट गैरस, हिप्पोकैम्पल फॉर्मेशन, एमिग्डालिड न्यूक्लियस. सो ये जो सारे स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं इनका फिर आपस में कनेक्शन है. सो देयर इज अ पाथवे विच विल कनेक्ट दीज टू. फॉर एग्जांपल देयर इज अ पाथवे विच विल कनेक्ट दीज टू, देयर इज अ पाथवे विच मे कनेक्ट दीज टू. सो देयर आर स्ट्रक्चर्स एंड देन देयर आर कनेक्टिंग पाथवेज. तो आपको स्ट्रक्चर्स के भी नाम पता होने चाहिए जो इनिशियल 3 लाइन्स में लिखे हैं, और फिर इन कनेक्टिंग पाथवेज के भी नाम पता होने चाहिए जो यहाँ ये सब लिखे हुए हैं. ओके, तो ये मोटी मोटी आपको मैंने जो बेसिक स्ट्रक्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है वो समझाई है. अब डिटेल में ऑब्वियसली आपको नाम और उनके काम पता होने चाहिए. सो ये जो पूरा हिप्पोकैम्पल फॉर्मेशन है, इट कंसिस्ट ऑफ हिप्पोकैम्पस, डेंटेट गायरस एंड द पैरा हिप्पोकैम्पल गायरस. ये स्ट्रक्चर्स मिलके इसके लिए हम वर्ड यूज करते हैं हिप्पोकैम्पल फॉर्मेशन. जैसे रेटिकुलर फॉर्मेशन था, बिल्कुल ऐसे ही हिप्पोकैम्पल फॉर्मेशन. And hippocampal formation itself is an important and integral part of the limbic system. ठीक है, तो यहाँ ये बता रहा है कि hippocampal formation किन किन चीज़ों से मिलके बनता है. It's composed of the dentate gyrus, parahippocampal gyrus, and hippocampus. Hippocampus is a curved elevation of gray matter that extends throughout the entire length of the floor of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Its anterior end is expanded to form the pes hippocampus. It is named so because it actually resembles the seahorse. तो इस डायग्राम में वो थोड़ा क्लियर नजर आ रहा है. So this is the hippocampus for example. It's all the gray matter, और इसका जो anterior end है, this is the anterior end of the brain, and this has a different shape. It is particularly called pes hippocampus. All right, the convex ventricular surface is covered with ependyma, beneath which lies the thin layer of white matter, which is the alveus. And alveus is a connecting pathway. Alveus, fimbri, these are all the connecting pathways. And usually the connecting pathways are composed of white matters. ये tracts होते हैं, axons होते हैं इनमें, and therefore they appear white. और जहाँ cell bodies होंगी, that part will appear gray. The fimbri in turn becomes continuous with the crust of the fornix. The hippocampus terminate posteriorly beneath the splenium of the corpus callosum. So you have to actually remember a few diagrams in context of the limbic system. For example, ये जो diagram है, I would suggest spending a few minutes remembering different parts of this diagram. So starting from here, for example, we have anterior nucleus of thalamus. So you have now an orientation that this thing is anterior nucleus of thalamus, and then we have the mammillary body, and then from the mammillary body what we are seeing is arising a connecting stuff, और ये जो connecting stuff है, that is the fornix. mammillary body से ये पूरा connecting fiber fornix का निकल रहा है, ये भी fornix continue है. This was the column of the fornix, this is the body of the fornix, and then it is going all the way down and then continuing actually as fimbria. अब इसी तरह ये जो मेमोरी बॉडी है और एंटीरियर न्यूक्लियस ऑफ थैलेमस है, इसके बीच में भी एक कनेक्टिंग ट्रैक्ट है. इस कनेक्टिंग ट्रैक्ट का नाम है मेमिलोथैलेमिक ट्रैक्ट है. और फिर देयर इज स्ट्राया टर्मिनालिस. स्ट्राया टर्मिनालिस इज ऑल्सो कनेक्टिंग विद द फॉर्निक्स एंड इट इज गोइंग ऑल द वे टू द amygdaloid body. This is the amygdaloid body. So this is how you have to approach this particular diagram. Then you should ask that what is this green structure? That is uncus and parahippocampal gyrus. उससे थोड़ा सा ऊपर superior to this there is a dentate gyrus. Then there is hippocampus, and then ये पूरा तो fornix से था. So there was a column of the fornix, there was the body of the fornix, and then there is crust of the fornix. Okay, so these are different structures which actually make the limbic system, main structures and then their connections. Okay, there is also an anterior commissure which is inferiorly connected with the olfactory system, and superolaterally then it turns all the way around the corpus callosum, and this is the part of the longitudinal stria. So this is an important diagram, guys. Spend few minutes here. This is another view where you can see the hippocampus and the pes hippocampus. Also another view of the connecting system, the fimbri and the fornix. यहाँ ये fornix lateral view आप देख रहे थे तो इस तरह से नजर आ रहा है. अगर मैं इसको इस सेक्शन में देखूंगा तो the fornix appear like this. You can also see the parahippocampal gyrus here. So these are a little difficult diagrams, but try to go slowly over the diagram and try to absorb and understand these diagrams. Okay, right, it's a dry topic. Neuroanatomy पूरी की पूरी काफी dry है, but it may be of interest if you read them slowly. Try to build up the concepts. Okay, फिर इन्होंने dentate gyrus की थोड़ी सी details दी हैं कि the dentate gyrus is a narrow notched band of gray matter that lies between the fimbri of hippocampus and parahippocampal gyrus. So if you go back to this diagram here, you know this is the dentate gyrus. On one end we have fimbri, on the other hand we have parahippocampal gyrus. So let me show this to you that this here is the dentate gyrus. Okay, इसके एक तरफ क्या चीज मौजूद है, fimbri, और इसके दूसरे तरफ क्या चीज मौजूद है, parahippocampal gyrus. So the easiest way to understand these things would be to read from the text and then try to locate it in the diagram. Posteriorly the gyrus accompanies, this is a lot of detail, not important, I don't recommend remembering all this, but the parahippocampal gyrus अभी मैंने ऊपर diagram में आपको दिखाया था, it lies between the hippocampal fissure and the collateral sulcus. Then there is a structure called amygdaloid nucleus, and this amygdaloid nucleus is another important component of the limbic system. It is so named because it resembles an almond. बादाम होता है ना, almond, उसकी तरह से है the amygdaloid body. ये थोड़ा सा गोल मटोल बादाम है, वैसे बादाम थोड़ा सा oval shape का होता है, but anyways amygdaloid nucleus है तो it is actually gray matter. Okay, it is situated partly anteriorly and partly superior to the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. So that is the location of the amygdaloid body. ओके इससे ज़्यादा इसमें याद रखने की ज़रूरत भी नहीं है. देन द कनेक्टिंग पाथवेज, तो ये कुछ स्ट्रक्चर्स इन्होंने बताए. बेसिकली ये जो सारे स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं जो मैंने आपको यहाँ नाम बताए थे कि व्हाट आर द इम्पॉर्टेंट स्ट्रक्चर्स ऑफ लिम्बिक सिस्टम. द इम्पॉर्टेंट स्ट्रक्चर्स आर द सिंगुलेट गायरस, द पैराहिपोकैम्पल गायरस, द हिपोकैम्पल फॉर्मेशन. इन सब की डिटेल्स अपने अपने रेलिवेंट चैप्टर्स में हैं. कि ये बेसिकली काम क्या करते हैं। तो एक तो ये स्ट्रक्चर्स आपको पता होने चाहिए, फिर इनके कनेक्टिंग पाथवे ऑफ द लिम्बिक सिस्टम आर एल्वियस, फिम्बरी, fornix and mammillothalamic tract as well as stria terminalis. So ये 5 are important connections between the structures of the limbic system. Alveus जो है it consists of a thin layer of white, ये सारे white matter हैं, they are none of them is gray matter. इसी तरह जो fimbri है that is also the white matter. इससे ज़्यादा it's a lot of detail written here कि उसका fornix किस तरफ से जाएगा, कैसे करेगा, किस तरह से वो rotate करेगा. एग्जाम में actually examiners do not ask these things. तो उनका favorite question for example होता है कि what are the important structures of limbic system, what are the different connecting pathways. तो आपको ये नहीं कहना कि जी parahippocampi formation जो है वो बेसिकली आप कह देंगे कनेक्टिंग पाथवे, नहीं, बिकॉज ये इंपॉर्टेंट है समझना. मैं बार बार जो वर्ड यूज कर रहा हूं कि व्हाट आर द स्ट्रक्चर्स. सो देयर आर ग्रे स्ट्रक्चर्स ऑफ लिम्बिक सिस्टम एंड देन देयर आर वाइट कनेक्शंस ऑफ लिम्बिक सिस्टम. इनके अलग अलग नाम हैं, तो ये नाम आपको वैसे ही याद होने चाहिए, ठीक है. इससे ज़्यादा डिटेल्स आर नॉट एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट. सो यू कैन न्यूरोएनाटमी को पढ़ने का बेस्ट तरीका ये है, यू शुड नो व्हाट टू रिमेंबर, व्हाट नॉट टू रिमेंबर. ओके, द नेक्स्ट हेडिंग इज हिप्पोकैम्पल स्ट्रक्चर एंड द डेंटेट गायरस. द कॉर्टिकल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द पैराहिप्पोकैम्पल गायरस इज 6 लेयर्ड. पैराहिप्पोकैम्पल गायरस की बात हो रही है. एज द कॉर्टेक्स इज ट्रेस्ड इनटू द हिप्पोकैम्पस देयर इज ग्रेजुअल ट्रांजिशन फ्रॉम अ 6 layer to a 3 layered arrangement. These 3 layers are superficial molecular layer, pyramidal layer and then the polymorphic layer. So that's an important point as well because आपको कॉर्टेक्स की layers पता हैं, वो यहाँ आकर के पैराहिप्पोकैम्पल गायरस में चेंज हो जाती हैं. Then the dentate gyrus also has 3 layers but the pyramidal layer is replaced with the granular layer. So that's all important discussion कि हिप्पोकैम्पल स्ट्रक्चर में और डेंटेट गायरस के स्ट्रक्चर में what are the differences as compared to the other parts of the cerebral cortex. बाकी जगहों पे layers कौन सी होती हैं ये हमने पढ़ रखा है ऑलरेडी जब हमने सेरिब्रम की वीडियो की थी. यहाँ आपको पता होना चाहिए कि हिप्पोकैम्पल स्ट्रक्चर में भी और डेंटेट गायरस में भी देयर आर 3 layers. फिर वो 3 layers हिप्पोकैम्पल स्ट्रक्चर की अलग हैं और डेंटेट गायरस की अलग हैं, ठीक. नाउ सम afferent connections of the hippocampus, यानी हिप्पोकैम्पस में इंफॉर्मेशन कहाँ कहाँ से आती है. Afferent connections of hippocampus may be divided into 6 groups. Number 1, there are fibers arising in the cingulate gyrus pass to the hippocampus. So if you look at the diagram here, you should be able to identify where is the cingulate gyrus. So for example, this diagram more clearly tells you where is the cingulate gyrus. So spend some time, try to identify the cingulate gyrus, and from the cingulate gyrus, the fibers will pass to the hippocampus. So that's the first bundle of fibers, okay? So that's the first one, the cingulate gyrus to the hippocampus. So where do you think is hippocampus here? Can you identify the hippocampal area? That's of foremost value because आपको ये afferent fibers उसी वक्त समझ में आएंगे जब आप इन particular areas को identify कर सकते हैं. So for example, अगर इस diagram में हम identify करें, so this is the corpus callosum और उसके इर्द गिर्द this is the cingulate gyrus. So ये वाले जो fibers हैं जो अभी हमने पहला afferent पढ़ा है उसमें these area से fibers निकलेंगे and they will come into the hippocampal area. So यहाँ तक आएंगे इस area तक. So these fibers are the first type of input या afferent fibers. Then we have fibers which arise from the septal nuclei and they pass posterior in the fornix to the hippocampus. तो ये भी hippocampus तक आते हैं and they actually pass in the fornix. तो fornix के जरिए पहुंच रहे हैं ये hippocampus तक, okay? So that sort of fibers. Then there is third category of fibers which are arising from one hippocampus, pass across the midline to the opposite hippocampus. Then there are afferent fibers from the indusium gryzium pass posteriorly in the longitudinal stria to the hippocampus. ये fibers भी indusium gryzium के through they are also going to the hippocampal area. Then there are input from the entorhinal area which is the olfactory associated area and they also pass to the hippocampus. So this is the olfactory bulb and olfactory area and these fibers are also passing to the hippocampal area. These are another form of afferent fibers. And then there are fibers which arise from the dentate and the parahippocampal region and then they travel to hippocampus. So one thing to note is that everything or almost everything is coming ultimately to the hippocampal area. So this hippocampal area is of extreme importance कि यहाँ से भी फाइबर ट्रैवल करके यहाँ तक पहुँच रहे हैं, यहाँ से भी ट्रैवल करके यहाँ तक पहुँच रहे हैं, सिंगुलेट गैरेज से भी ट्रैवल करके यहाँ तक पहुँच रहे हैं. सो ऑल दीज आर द afferent inputs to the limbic system. And then what are the efferent connections? Axons of the large pyramidal cells of the hippocampus emerge from the alveus and the fimbria. So these are the major output pathways. These are the major efferent pathways. The fimbria continues as the crus of the fornix. The two crura they converge to form the body of the fornix, and the body of the fornix splits into two columns of the fornix which curve downward in front of the interventricular foramina. The fibers within the fornix are distributed to the following regions. So basically जो इसमें से exit output है limbic system से, वो इस पूरे fornix में से travel करता है, और fornix के columns में travel करने के बाद it is then distributed to some parts of the nervous system. For example, the fibers pass posterior to the anterior commissure to enter the mammillary body. So mammillary body is one area जहाँ पे limbic system का efferent channel आकर input देता है. Then the fibers also go to the anterior nucleus of thalamus. So anterior nucleus of thalamus, यहाँ भी fibers आते हैं from the limbic system. The fibers pass posterior to the anterior commissure to enter the tegmentum of the midbrain. So midbrain is another domain. So we are collecting the areas जहाँ जहाँ information आती है from the limbic system. So that includes mammillary body, that includes thalamus, that includes midbrain. What else? Anterior part of the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus also receives input from the limbic system, and then also the habenacular nuclei. So these are all important stuff एग्जाम में पूछते हैं, आपको ये जगह पता होनी चाहिए जहाँ जहाँ तक लिम्बिक सिस्टम का efferent आउटपुट निकल के जाता है. सो इन तमाम ऑर्गन्स के लिए वो इनपुट कहलाएगा, बिकॉज हाइपोथैलेमस, तो मैं जुमला ये कहूँगा कि हाइपोथैलेमस विल रिसीव इनपुट फ्रॉम दी limbic system. या मैं इसी जुमले को ऐसे भी कह सकता हूँ कि limbic system sends its output to the hypothalamus. So it's depend upon in what context you are actually using the word input and output. The consideration, so basic बात क्या हुई कि the limbic system receives input from different parts, those are the afferent fibers, and then it sends output to different parts which are called the efferent fibers. Consideration of the above complex anatomical pathway indicates that the structures comprising the limbic system not only are interconnected but also send projection fibers to many other parts of the nervous system. Obviously हमने यहाँ देखा कि thalamus में भी fibers जा रहे हैं, mammillary body में जा रहे हैं, midbrain में जा रहे हैं, hypothalamus में जा रहे हैं. So physiologists now they are beginning to recognize the importance of the hypothalamus as being a major output pathway of the limbic system. Basically, if I ask you what is the major input processing unit of the limbic system, so that is the hippocampus. You notice that all the fibers are ultimately coming to the hippocampus. And if I ask you what is the major outflow processing unit, so that is probably hypothalamus. So everything goes to hypothalamus, and from there the fibers go out to interact with different parts of the nervous system. अभी limbic system जो इतना complicated सा है, जिसके हमने different parts पढ़े, उनके connecting fibers पढ़े, उसका काम क्या है? The limbic system obviously via hypothalamus and its connection with outflow of the autonomic nervous system and its control of the endocrine system is able to influence many aspects of emotional behavior, and these include particularly reactions of fear, anger, emotions associated with sexual behavior. These are all controlled by the limbic system. Evidence also suggests that the hippocampus is concerned with converting recent memory to long-term memory. Actually, ये जो memory की story है ना, ये अभी तक भी बिल्कुल clearly understood नहीं है कि how do human brains actually process memory. So we actually don't know about this much. हमको इसके बारे में बहुत fine details नहीं पता. It is believed that hippocampus has to play a role in this. A lesion of the hippocampus results in individual being unable to store long-term memory. इस तरह पता लगा है कि वो लोग जिनमें hippocampus damaged है किसी भी वजह से, they are unable to process long-term memories. तो साइंटिस्ट देन आइडेंटिफाई कि परहैप्स हिपोकैम्पस का एक काम है टू स्टोर और टू प्रोसेस लॉन्ग टर्म मेमोरी. Memory of remote past events before the lesion developed is unaffected, but after the lesion the person cannot recall long things. The condition is called anterograde amnesia. ये हम पढ़ेंगे जब हम clinical disorders की बात करेंगे न्यूरोलॉजी के. Note that the injury of the amygdaloid nucleus and the hippocampus produces greater memory loss than injury to either one of these structures, which means कि amygdaloid body और hippocampus आपस में मिलके memory process करते हैं. Even evidence does not show that the limbic system has olfactory function, so there is no role in the olfaction, although it is connected. यानी अगर आप ये पाथवे देखें तो यहाँ से इनपुट आ रहा होता है ऑल्फैक्टरी ट्रैक्ट से, ऑल्फैक्टरी बल्ब से हिपोकैम्पस तक इनपुट आता है लिम्बिक सिस्टम में. बट मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग इस पे ये है कि आज इसका रोल नहीं पता, हो सकता है फ्यूचर में पता चल जाए. बट एज ऑफ टुडे वी डोंट थिंक दैट द ऑल्फैक्टरी फंक्शन इज associated with the limbic system. Its various afferent and efferent connections provide pathways for integration and effective homeostatic responses to a wide variety of environmental stimuli. मैं जब कभी कोई न्यूरो एनाटमी का चैप्टर कंप्लीट करता हूँ तो आखिर में यही बात खुद भी सोच रहा होता हूँ कि क्या ब्रेन और क्या नर्वस सिस्टम बनाया है भाई बनाने वाले ने, कि एक तो अभी तक हमें इसकी पूरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग भी नहीं है, समझ भी नहीं आया काम कैसे कर रहा है. बट व्हाट अ ब्यूटीफुल स्ट्रक्चर. आई मीन थिंक अबाउट इट, द ब्रेन, द मेडुला, द स्पाइनल कॉर्ड, द कनेक्शंस, द स्ट्रक्चर्स, द ग्रे मैटर, द वाइट मैटर, द न्यूक्लियाई. I mean, amazing stuff. It's a beauty piece, you know. It's a masterpiece of engineering. But anyways, we all have this beautiful structure and we are trying to understand what are the different structures and how do we approach understanding them. So that's all about this chapter. आपसे मुलाकात होगी किसी और चैप्टर में बहुत जल्द. अपना ख्याल रखिएगा.